The U.S. Department of Energy is cleaning up the Oak Ridge Reservation of residual hazardous and radioactive contamination left over as a result of decades of nuclear energy research. Much of that work has been influenced by the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup operations. You're welcome to attend the meetings and be part of this important work. For more information, call us or visit our website.
I would remind the members, please turn off all of your electronic communication equipment. Put it on vibrate or silence. If there's anybody requiring assistance, if we have to exit the building in emergency, please let the staff know, but we have 2 means of egress at each end of the building. During the presentation or when you want to make comments, please use your tents, set them up so that they can be seen by the chairman or the presenter. We will answer questions from the board first and then from the audience. And use your microphones, please. We need to pick it up for recording areas. The next meeting is going to be November 12th. The place, the subject, and the format is to be determined. But we are going to meet November 12th, but everything else is under consideration. We'll let you know by email, if need be, by telephone. And according to the sign on the wall, I think I've covered everything on there, and we will proceed with the agenda items. Tonight's presentation topic is going to be the East Tennessee Technology Park. Oh, wait, that's next month. We canceled that. Our presentation tonight is going to be an ORNL update. If you have a computer, your password is Big Orange Country. If you don't have a computer, you don't need the Big Orange Country. Moving along to Section 2, comments from the Deputy Designated Federal Officer, DOE, EPA, and TDEC. We will start with Ms. Kange.
Good evening, everybody. Probably the most significant thing that I'd like to share with everyone is an event that we had this afternoon to commemorate the start of the demolition of the K-31 building structure. So that's a very significant milestone for us. K-31 is the 4th gaseous diffusion building at the East Tennessee Technology Park. There's a total of 5. So once this building is demolished, there will only be 1 gaseous diffusion building remaining. That's building K-27. And of course, our contractor UCOR is very busy working on the preparation of that building so that when we finish demolition of the K-31 building, we will be able to move over to demolition of the K-27 building. So today was a momentous day for the program. We had a small celebration out at the site with some of our elected officials, and it was really a wonderful way to celebrate midweek. Also, the other thing I wanted to share is one of the things that I took away when we had our annual planning meeting was that you all would like to consider some different formats for some of the meetings and even some things that are a little more informal. So I have proposed for some time in the next few months, in lieu of a meeting, for us to have a meet and greet opportunity for the environmental management team. So we have 10 federal employees. You meet each of them as they come in and give various presentations. Bill McMillan, the presenter tonight, is a member of the EM management team. And I thought it might be nice for us to have an informal meeting where no formal presentations or whatnot, but just an opportunity for people to meet and talk about our projects and get to know each other. So that is something that hopefully you all will support, and if so, then we'll put it on the calendar for sometime in the next couple of months. And I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. And that's exciting news about K-31 commencing. So, yes, Mr. Paulus.
Before we go on, can I ask Sue a question?
Why, of course you may.
In conjunction with what you just said, would it have been appropriate to invite the SSAB to the little K31 activities this afternoon or this morning? And if it would have been, when we do K27 or finish all three and you do the follow-on, you know, because you just mentioned getting the board more involved.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent suggestion. It would have been appropriate. Our executive officer, who's responsible for arranging these things, has a list of people that normally get invited to those types of events. So I will talk with him about adding the members of the Site-Specific Advisory Board to that list so that when these things come up, you all will get an invitation. I think that's a great suggestion. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paulus. Very valid point. Mr. Adler.
I don't have anything to add this month. Thanks.
Okay. Is Ms. Jones from EPA, are you on the telephone?
Yes, I am. I am here, and I also do not have anything to add.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Jones. And TDEC, Mr. Charterisky?
Have any comments or any updates? Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Public comment period. Mr. Chori?
The public comment period is now open. Are there any members of the public that wish to comment? Seeing none. As a citizens advisory board to the Department of Energy on environmental cleanup, we want to encourage the community at large to attend and participate in our board and committee meetings. If you are unable to attend, please send in your questions and comments to the address shown. Appropriate comments and questions will be read during the public comment section of the SSAB meeting and will be given the same consideration by the board and DOE as those given in person. Meeting schedules and ways to communicate with the board can be obtained by calling 241-4583 or by visiting our website.
Thank you very much. Presentation time. Mr. Bill McMillan is a portfolio federal project director for the Department of Energy Oak Ridge Office of Environmental Management and is responsible for the management of the environmental management activities at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Bill has been with the Department of Energy for 28 years and joined the Oak Ridge Environmental Management Program in 1995. Bill's career has also included 5 years with the DOE Y-12 Site Office, 3 years with the Savannah River Operations Office, and 5 years with the South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. Bill has a Master's of Science degree in Environmental Systems Engineering from Clemson University and a Bachelor of Science degree in Biology from the College of Charleston. Bill, we look forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight to bring you up to date on things that are going on at ORNL. What I thought I'd do is start with a brief overview of the overall cleanup strategy that we have in the EM program for Oak Ridge National Lab. And then once I've many of you may have heard that already, but if not, it's a good refresher. But after I do that, then I'll kind of go through several of the major activities that we've been doing over the past year to year and a half or so to bring you up to speed on some of the challenges that we have and some of the maintenance activities that we've been doing. Thanks. So just as a refresher, most people know where ORNL is, but Oak Ridge National Lab is down in the southern region of the reservation. It's in 2 separate valleys separated by a ridge, the Bethel Valley and Melton Valley in the southern part. And we have EM cleanup missions in both of those valleys that I'll talk to specifically a little bit. First of all, in terms of the overall scope, we have some ongoing facility operations and activities that we have to do regardless of doing any cleanup work. And these are mainly operations activities. There's surveillance and maintenance activities to maintain the facilities that we have in the program to make sure that they remain safe for operations or safe for standby operation for the activities that we have to do in the facilities that are no longer being used and are destined for future D&D. The LGWO liquid gaseous waste operations activities are basically running the treatment facility at the lab. That's the primary liquid wastewater treatment systems that consists of the liquid low-level waste system as well as the process waste system, and also the gaseous stack system that collects and discharges the laboratory ventilation systems from the Office of Science laboratories that are in operation. The last major thing we have going on in my portfolio is the U-233 disposition activities that take place, that we plan to take place at Building 3019. The nation's stockpile of uranium-233 is stored there, and we have a mission to disposition that material over the next several years. For the future remedial action scope, I've summarized it here between Bethel Valley and Melton Valley. The scopes are very similar. There's about 160 facilities, individual facilities that we have in Bethel Valley that consists of anything from isotope processing facilities, hot cell facilities, old reactor facilities with pools that can still contain activated metals, gas handling, the stack system, which I mentioned, and the liquid wastewater systems that I mentioned with the associated piping and tanks associated with that. Leftover contaminated slabs from buildings that have been previously demolished, and the slabs remain. And then a final record of decision for Bethel Valley that we have to coordinate with the regulator input. Same kind of thing in Melton Valley, 108 facilities there. MSRE is one of the major facilities that we have out there. It was defueled several years ago. The salt residues continue to be stored in the facility in these salt drain tanks and flush tanks. And I have a slide on that in a few minutes that'll show the activities that we kind of have to routinely maintain for the MSRE facility. Tanks and contents of contaminated resins that are stored, waste processing and storage facilities, and then finally we get to a final ROD for Melton Valley cleanup too. All of this scope, the future D&D, is not in our near-term baseline. I have the near-term baseline listed here is what we are currently working on and is the high priorities for continuing through FY 2020, being the U-233 direct disposition campaign, where we're trying to dispose of the Consolidated Edison uranium solidification project materials to Nevada, and then beginning the downblending operations for the remainder of the inventory there. Also, that's not really focused on Oak Ridge National Lab, but in my portfolio, I manage the groundwater investigations that have come out of the development of the groundwater strategy that we have with the state and EPA. And focusing on that, I've got a slide at the end that kind of talks about the two major emphasis areas that we're currently working on for the groundwater strategy. And then through 2024, which is our 10-year time period, to complete the uranium-233 disposition activities. That includes the processing campaign. And then after 2024, on out to 2045, in our current baseline is the demolition and remediation of all the buildings that we talked about on the previous slide. And continuing with our ongoing base operations of managing the treatment facilities that I mentioned and doing the surveillance and maintenance and environmental monitoring programs for groundwater that we do. Challenges in doing this work, most of the D&D work and the EM mission is in this central quadrant of OR&L. You can see over here is where the active science missions and brand new modernized laboratory facilities that they have in the Office of Science on this east end of OR&L, and also the biological science areas on the west end of OR&L. We're kind of sandwiched in the middle with all these old facilities that need to be cleaned up and managed. And there's even science missions within several buildings that are in this footprint. So performing this work in close proximity to the lab's missions is an essential and a challenge that we have to manage as we go through the program. Many of the facilities that we have in this area are deteriorating. They're old. They're built mostly in the 40s, 50s, 60s time frames. And a lot of them contain radiological material that's specialized for, that the lab was in production with. So, and it requires special handling, special packaging to disposition it. And so those are the primary challenges that we have to deal with in the program. And obviously the overall goal of the mission is to support the Office of Science's missions at ORNL in furthering research needs for the nation. And so talking about recent accomplishments, I've got a slide on each one of these to kind of talk through the things that we've been working on as the major priority areas, and I'll go through these one at a time. First of all, at the process waste treatment facility, about a year ago or so, we realized and diagnosed some failures. The filtration of these dual media filters at the process waste treatment complex were becoming more sluggish, and so we dissected one of those filters and found that there was a failure of the filter plates in there that were clogging the discharge ports. And so we took an effort to evaluate our options for dealing with the failed filters. These were each, original equipment. The facility is about 25 years old now, and it's well beyond its lifespan. So the maintenance actions at the process waste treatment facilities is becoming more and more frequent that we have to address. So in looking at these filters and what to do about them, we decided to retrofit a couple of these columns. These are the granule activated carbon columns that we use. Two of these, they're really kind of over-designed, so we're using two of these columns for that final filtration step now. And we have converted one of these columns to replace the granule activated carbon with a product called Mersorb. Mersorb is a manufactured carbon product that has a higher affinity for absorbing mercury. And since some of the water that goes through this facility contains mercury, it does a much more efficient job of removing that mercury from that wastewater. So instead of replacing these dual media filters in like kind, which would have cost several $1 million, we've with the state's approval, did the engineering work to evaluate the use of these GAC columns as the filtration step, and have gotten approval to use that in that manner. We are doing some studies and sampling to confirm that the filtration is still being successfully accomplished, and have to submit a report to the state to demonstrate that. But that's going very successfully at this time, and has saved us about $3 to $4 million in capital requirements to replace those filters. The other thing that we've done out at this facility is this new sulfuric acid tank. The original sulfuric acid tank had developed some leaks, and a few years ago it was taken out of service and replaced with temporary, we call them totes, plastic. They're big poly plastic tanks, 300-gallon tanks, and making the connections and disconnections from that was a hazard for the workers. In fact, we had one worker that had some acid splashed on him and gave him some facial burns. So we've replaced the sulfuric acid totes with a permanent system that includes a new tank on a pad and associated piping and control systems associated with that, so that we can bulk feed that tank and not have to deal with the hazards. We're also planning to do, in the gaseous waste system, we haven't done inspections of the internals of these stacks in many years. It's been at least 10 to 15 years. And so it's been a challenge to figure out how to do this, but UCOR came up with the thoughts of using a drone system, and we've investigated that and are well on the way towards planning to use a drone that will fly up to the top of the stack and drop a camera down inside based on a tethered cable. The cameras I think there's 3 cameras that will be mounted to each one of these tethers that goes down the stack, taking video of the inside of the stack. It'll be done over a 3-day period, basically about a day per each of these 3 stacks that we're going to be doing, and it's a very economical way of doing this and prevents us from having to get men up inside that stack to expose them to the hazards of what may be in there. So that's underway with the planning of it. We're trying to get this implemented in the December timeframe, but we're working now to understand whether that's a doable schedule. It may be a couple of months after that, depending on any approvals that we have to get from the Federal Aviation Administration to get the approvals to fly the drones up there. But we think that's a workable solution. MSRE, we do routine maintenance on the the two fuel drain tanks and the flush tank that's in this system that manages the off gas from the defueled salts that are contained in there. We do pump downs of that system every 6 months or so. The off gas that's generated is a fluorine gas that's highly corrosive. And so we have to pump that down to keep the fluorine gas from generating, and we replace it with argon. So the system, the last pump downs were done, and we did one this series about a year ago and another one in May, and we're getting ready to do another pump down. The gases that are collected there are routed through the NAF traps and alumina traps, and we recently went through an effort to take those NAF traps, weigh them to see if we're capturing uranium and how much uranium we're capturing, and that gives us an idea then of how successful the defueling activity was. So the uranium that was captured in this weighing activity, we found to be very, very low, indicating the defueling was successful. And we also monitor the off gas that we see when we do the pump downs, and we may be able to go to a less frequent pump down schedule as well based on the generation rate of the fluorine gas. The system that does that gas monitoring is called the RGRS system, Reactive Gas Removal System. It's aged in itself in terms of its system. So over the last year, we've been planning for the upgrade of that system and have the equipment in plant now. And after this next pump down that we're going to do in October, we're going to go in and replace and upgrade that system. So been a lot of activities out at MSRE to try to modernize the approaches that we're using to control this off-gassing and to get the data we need to support the eventual removal of the salt for disposal at WIPP. Building 3026 was a facility that was taken down during the Recovery Act. It's not a real good picture of the hot cells that remain, although there's one of the hot cells is under this structure, weather structure here. And there's on the other side of that is another hot cell that was sealed up. But we had some residual contamination in some of the fines that were left over on the pad for the building 3026, and the photo here is showing a polymer fixative that we've applied to that pad to try to control runoff of any kind of contamination that might come out from the surface water during rain events. And so addressing the residual contamination on that pad is something that's been going for a little while, and we have some more actions that we'll be doing in the coming months to seal hot cells and try to prevent inflow of water onto that pad. But that's been it's been an effort to take a look and design a system economically that will help us control any discharges off of that pad. It's all being contained, there's nothing getting out. We do monitor, and the residual contaminations are very low. Waste disposition is another activity we've been actively working on. There was some waste populations that were left over from the defueling activities at MSRE that have gotten a lot of attention from our regulators, and we've been working on a schedule that's been approved by them to characterize and dispose of that legacy material. There's a couple of other facilities around that have some old waste containers that are starting to degrade, and so we're prioritizing some of the work to characterize and disposition these legacy waste at the site, several locations around the site. Pratt & Whitney shield. The Pratt & Whitney shield was used out at the tower shielding facility back in the day, in the 60s, I guess. There's an old picture here of it being used out there. It was done in shielding studies where they could apply different shielding experiments without having to get ground interference. And so that shield, once the missions were completed out at the tower shielding facility, the shield was moved into Building 7602 for storage and eventual disposition. UTB operates a facility adjacent to Building 7602, and there's enough uranium encompassed in the shield walls that it interfered from a dose perspective with what they were wanting to do in the adjacent facility. So UTB funded work that that UCOR has coordinated with them to relocate that shield over to Building 7823, I believe it was, out at SWASA 5. And so the photos here, all this took place in September to remove the shield. It's about an 8-ton shield, remove it from Building 7602 and relocate it to SWASA 5. And so now it's stored out at SWASA 5 inside of the material storage structure at that facility. U-233, as I mentioned earlier, Building 3019 is the home of the uranium-233 material. It requires a high security obligation that the lab has to manage, and it basically sets the entire security protocols for the lab just because of this facility. So it's a high priority for the lab's missions to have EM disposition this material. The CUS material is the first major, the direct disposition campaign was the major first campaign. We've accomplished shipments of a material called the Zipper population. It was 126 canisters that were shipped out to Nevada. We've done some transfers of 17 canisters of high purity material back to the Office of Science for use in their missions across the complex. And we're ready to ship the 403 canisters of the CUS material as soon as any issues that we're trying to resolve with the state of Nevada at the headquarters level releases us to make those shipments. But everything is in place to perform those shipments, and we're ready to go as soon as we get released to do that. We're also working to prepare Building 2026 across the street from Building 3019 for the future downblending and solidification steps for the waste for the U-233 material that requires processing. UTB, we funded UTB in FY14 to begin that activity, and they're upgrading. You can see the back of the hot cells in that building here and the cell access area that's all been cleaned out. Partially, a lot of this was done with Recovery Act dollars, but we're continuing to fund UTB with our U-233 money to upgrade Building 2026 to prepare it for the future processing campaign. And so we'll be ready to go with that in a couple of years once we're finished with the CUSP campaign. The Oak Ridge Research Reactor Pool Leak. This is an issue that surfaced in early September. It was noticed that around this shimrod port here in the bottom of the reactor pool, we were seeing some drips of water coming out. So there was a lot of activity to confirm, number one, that water was coming from the pool. And sampling analysis did confirm that the water was coming from the pool. Since the early days of the seeps from around this flange, seeps have also surfaced in other areas along the north wall and the south wall of the pool. So UCOR has implemented a war room to manage that leak. Jeff Selvey's here. He's chairing that activity over there. But basically working in several fronts to try to address this leak. One is to evaluate the pool to see if we can locate where the leak is originating from. There's been a lot of videography done within the pool, not just to look for leaks in the liner of the pool, but also to look at the materials in the pool and to get accurate dose readings so we understand what the inventory is of activated metal that the pool is there to protect us from the dose from. The pool water is necessary to protect. You can see the dose rates associated with these roughly on the order of 20 to 2,000 to 2,500 R per hour. So the metals that are in there, even though they're all defueled, it's a lot of activated metal that still has a significant dose from cobalt-60 primarily. And so the pool is providing shielding for that metal, and as long as that metal's there, we need to have that shielding provided. So looking at the liner, looking at doing the verifications of what's in the pool, as well as trying to evaluate a long-term solution which can consist of the removal of that material for disposition and ultimately draining the pool. So far, we haven't found the source of the leak. There's been a lot of borescoping and looking at liner systems and drainage systems for the liner. Everything is coming up empty on finding a source at this point in time. We've completed the underwater camera work. We've done the dose rate evaluations. We're looking at the potential solutions to repair a leak, although if you don't know where the leak is from, it's hard to get very far on figuring out what the solutions are. And then we're looking at the options to remove the components, and you've had some subcontractors in trying to help with that activity. So hopefully in the next week or so, we'll have a plan together for how to approach this and resolve the issue with the pool. There's an adjacent reactor building, building 3010 is the bolt shielding reactor. It's located right behind the 3042 Oak Ridge Research Reactor. It has a similar pool. It's an in-ground pool, and it has activated metal components in it as well. And so we're taking an extent of condition into that pool as well to see if there's some lessons learned and activities that we should undertake over there as well. So a lot of activities going on right now with Building 3042, and it's a work in progress. Lastly, the groundwater strategy indicated that we have basically 2 efforts ongoing to implement the groundwater strategy. The strategy was developed last fiscal year in coordination with EPA and the state of Tennessee to define the activities that the reservation should be approaching on managing the groundwater on the reservation and prioritizing remedial actions. Before we got into doing on-site work, though, we realized that there were some sporadic low concentration hits of some radionuclides and elements across the river, the Clinch River. So right now we're focusing work on taking a further evaluation of any issues in groundwater flow pathways to the other side of the Clinch River. And so the off-site groundwater assessment is the top priority project per se. We've gotten approval of the remedial site evaluation plan from TDEC and EPA. We're trying to contact homeowners and property owners over on the other side of the river to gain access to sample their wells. And we'll be conducting site visits to confirm what wells will be of value to the program. And we've also, over the last few weeks, had some discussions with the Roane County executive to let them know from the public perspective what we're up to over there. So been a lot of work planning this groundwater assessment. At the same time, we're starting to develop a model that can be used to help us with making decisions on our remedial actions from a groundwater perspective. We've tasked a technical advisory group, which consists of experts from off-site the reservation. As experts, there's someone from Queens, there's USGS representative, got a couple of other experts in karst geology and groundwater flow through karst geology to help us develop this model that will be used. Regulators and both EPA and TDEC, as well as our own folks, are involved with interfacing with the technical advisory group to develop this model. There's good information on the Bear Creek Valley is the best information we have from a groundwater perspective that has the most data on it. And so the models that we're putting together, at least on a trial basis, have been compared with data that we've seen out of the Bear Creek Valley work, and there's very good correlation on how the model is running compared with the data that we've been historically seeing from Bear Creek Valley. So the work right now is working to address that model on the reservation, and will ultimately expand the model to address groundwater flow all the way to the Tennessee River, which is, quite a number of miles out to the west. So it'll be a regional model that'll have regional applications as it applies to plumes coming from the reservation. We expect to have the modeling work done by the end of fiscal year 16 and be applying that. So I guess that's it. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Bill. That's a lot of territory covered.
Yes.
Before we open it up for questions and answers, I'd like to ask Connie Jones of the EPA, do you have any questions for Mr. McMillan?
No, I don't. Carl Floty from our office is working on the groundwater strategy, and he's been actively involved.
Okay. I can't see your tent. I thought I'd give you an opportunity.
I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Ready for some questions?
Sure.
We'll start with Ms. Price and then Mr. Paulus.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. I have one question about the groundwater model. Are you developing, is it primarily a conceptual model you're doing at this stage, or are you doing mathematical models, 1D, 2D, 3D? Is it primarily a physical system model at this point, or are you going to be coupling it with solute transport?
Yeah.
What's the pathway forward for that?
It'll be a 3D model that looks very extensively at depth and length of contaminant movement throughout the region that we're looking at.
Okay. What code are you going to be using? Do you
It's
know?
using ModFlow.
ModFlow. Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Paulus.
Yeah, Bill, thank you very much. Just a question on the leaky pool.
Okay.
100 drips a minute, and if I remember right, 20 drips is like a cc or something.
Yeah, milliliter.
That's going back 50 plus years. Has that
Me
been
too.
constant over a gazillion length of time? Has that increased, decreased?
Since the first leaks were first observed in early September, it's about the same. Now, we've done some tests to do some mass balance calculations based on the pool volume and evaporation rates within the building. And to be honest, we're seeing the 100 drips a minute, but we're losing more than that. We're losing about 100 gallons a day. So there's still some uncertainty as to where the rest of it's going. So.
That was the reason for the question.
Okay.
Thank you. What's the prog for
Now, we do know another thing is
finding it?
well, the funding is an issue. Just let me add, though, we do know that what water is coming out is collected in the building plumbing systems, and it is going to treatment at the LGWO. So it's not something that's spreading into the environment, per se. Funding is an issue. We know it's going to cost something to deal with this. UCOR is still working their funding estimates, and then we'll have to work with headquarters to see if there's additional funding that we can obtain for addressing it.
You don't have it as a major unknown problem at this point. It's just a minor irritant at this point.
Well, it's an irritant we know we need to address in some method, so, yes.
If I can just add real quickly to that. Bill is absolutely right. Our first approach is to see if there is any additional funding that we can obtain, because this is not something that we, of course, planned for and have funding in reserve to utilize. If we're not successful and there is not additional funding, then we have to look within our own funding profiles for all of our various projects and figure out how we're going to pay for this. So this, and this is something that we will do. We're not going to let this situation continue. We'll just have to make some difficult decisions about what doesn't get done so that this can be addressed.
As a maintenance professional, I'll tell you, one of the first things you want to do is stop any water leakage any place at any time. You just cannot go on.
Well, we know that too from Building 3026 that had the leaking roof, and it became so bad in that building that we couldn't send people in to maintain it, so.
K-25 also.
Yeah.
Dr. Hatcher, you have some questions, sir?
Bill, thank you for a very nice, succinct presentation covering a lot of ground there.
Sure.
My question is regarding the reconfiguration of the process waste treatment complex. What actually is the role of the sulfuric acid facility?
The sulfuric acid is used to adjust the pH in the precipitation process for treating the wastewater.
Okay, so you're precipitating sulfates out?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Wolfang?
A question about the groundwater model. I know you're looking at the completing the rod for groundwater in the near future. I know you're doing the.
Oh, it's not the near future. Probably in the 30s or 40s.
Yeah. Well, now you're doing the groundwater model. Will that be part of the rod, or you're still characterizing the site?
Well, the model will really be used to help us make decisions on the prioritization of which plumes we need to address, which ones are the worst and have the most potential to migrate off-site. And so that will kind of help us prioritize what plumes to go tackle first. But obviously, once we complete remedial actions, if there's, say, for example, there's a plume that we can't address completely, that model will help us make decisions to support the rod as well. So, in terms of natural attenuation or
I just ask a follow-on question. Have we finished the RI?
I'm sorry. Oh, what was the question?
Have we completed the RI?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You might want to explain about interim actions versus final actions.
Yeah, there was an interim rod that was completed, 10 years ago or more, for groundwater that led to the early actions for cleaning up remedial sites like over in the SWASA, in the Milk Valley for the solid waste storage areas where there were a lot of burials. And there was also documentation for that indicated that based on the best information we have on the groundwater, the near surface water is surfacing back to surface water, which we do monitor surface water to document the lack of impact to the Clinch River, for example. So there was an interim rod based on that allowed us to do the early actions. And then we understand, we acknowledge that after we've completed the future remedial actions, we'll need to go through another session, a round of decision-making on remediation of groundwater in the future with another rod that will address that, so as a final cleanup.
Ms. Daly?
All right, I'm going to ask I'm going to go back to the leak.
Okay.
Okay. Because all the time you're talking, I'm still thinking about that leak. How is that, I know the 100 drops per minute, but how is the other amount that you mentioned?
The 100 gallons?
How is that being measured? Is that going into a collection, but you don't know how it's getting there?
The way, if you can tell from the picture, let's see if oops. Okay. If you can see the pool here, the pool is within a building, and it's in the center of the building, and there is a basement. Sorry. This actual facility here, or structure, is actually in the basement underneath the pool. So we can see all through the surface of the pool, the sides, and pretty much a lot of the bottom. And we do know that there is, the leaks that we're seeing are falling onto the floor in the basement of the building. So that's the 100 drops a minute thing is that we're seeing in terms of drips.
Right.
There is also, underneath this building, a sump collection system. And there is actually an underground stream that's surfacing into this sump collection system, which may or may not be part of this 100 gallons. But I think you guys, Jeff, have sampled that stream or spring under there, and I don't know what your conclusions were on that. But But to know that there's 100 gallons that's not accounted for yet, we actually shut off all the water supply to the pool and then monitored the pool level for a number of days. And we also did a beaker test for evaporation, to measure evaporation out of a beaker. And so the difference in the pool level calculates to a volume that was ratioed against the beaker test. And so the a little bit over 100 gallons a day is the difference in what we can account for from an evaporation standpoint.
Okay, so you're not sure.
We're not sure where that
Where
other
that's
100
going?
gallons is going, yeah.
Thank
But
you.
we think I mean, the pool is all centrally located within the building with the spring underneath it. And I just got to believe that it's not getting outside of that spring. But that's to be confirmed. Jeff, you got something to add?
That spent fuel pool sits on about 5 to 6 foot of concrete. It's thick. And within that concrete, there is experimental facilities behind shield walls that we can't get to. We've been running bore scopes in there to try to get to it. But there's floor drains in there, and those floor drains drain to the manhole, which ends up going to LGWO that he talked about earlier. We know that there's flow in those flow drains. We know the general vicinity of the leak, and it's it's between the basement and the first floor. So yes, we can't see it, but we know there's 5 foot of concrete there that we can't get through, and there's drains in there, and that's where we think the water's going, and it end up going to LGWO. I don't know if that helps or not, but I'm trying.
Okay.
Bill, what is the ultimate disposition of the 3042 reactor pool going to be? Are we going to keep it in Perpetua, or is it going to be demolished one day?
Yeah, it'll end up being demolished. The materials that we had the shot of,
Right.
these activated components, we would remove those from the pool using some kind of shielded carriers to take it out and dispose of that at Nevada or wherever the appropriate disposal facility is. And then once those materials are removed, there's no need for the pool water to provide shielding anymore. So the initial actions, if we can remove that material, is to drain the pool. And then ultimately, the 3042 reactor building, and our baseline is out in the 2030s, would be demolition and disposition with rubble and disposed. So that's the ultimate plan.
All right, thank you. Perhaps
Okay.
you might want to consider moving that time frame up a little bit.
Well, at least to get the materials out and drain the pool, so, yeah.
Miss-
One of the things we're looking
Yeah. Well, I think if UCOR gets 31 and 27 down real quick, we may have some extra funding. Mr. Paulus.
But you've given me a briefing on a slide that says you have a 100 drip per minute problem, and this gentleman says it's really 100 gallons a day.
Yeah.
When you talk about it, be open. We're losing 100 gallons. We know 100 drips a minute are coming out of the floor. We don't know where the other 99 gallons a day are going. That's a little deceptive, the way you presented it, and I
Okay.
don't like that.
Okay, appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Dr. Hatcher.
I bet Bella's going to ask the same question. What's the level of contamination in the water that's coming out of there?
Jeff, you got the tritium numbers? I remember the initial sampling numbers you had was a little bit of tritium observed in the water, about 60 milligram, what's the unit? You don't remember? But there's a little bit of tritium in the water that has been observed, and that's how we could trace the sampling results back to the pool.
Is that the only contaminant?
Yeah,
It is-
because the rest of it is, the activated metals aren't leaching into the water or anything like that.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions of Ms. Price?
Is it possible for you to provide us with the information about what the tritium levels are in the water? Just
Yeah.
appreciate that, thank you.
Are there any more questions from the board? Ms. Smith? Please use your microphone.
where is this stream coming from and going to that I understood you to say was flowing under there?
Well, you know, the whole, all of O&L has springs all over it. And this one is right under the reactor building. It's collected in the building sump that Jeff indicated is pumping to the liquid low-level, to the process waste treatment system. So that spring is collected. It's not something that surfaces anywhere. It's going to treatment.
Anybody else? Are there any questions from the audience? I cannot see. If there are, Spencer, the microphone, please state your name.
Yeah, I'm Gloria May.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I live in Oak Ridge.
I know you.
Yeah, I have a question about that uranium-233 disposition. Yeah. Two questions. The first is, I think maybe 3 years ago, I heard a presentation by you and mentioned about this stage 1, stage 2 evaluation.
Yeah.
Although at that time you said they had been reviewed.
Yeah.
So are those like finalized, or so pretty much the uranium disposition is follow that stage 2 analysis?
Yeah, those
using the down blending or.
Yeah, those analysis were the ones that supported us to go with the direct disposition campaign for about half of it, and the use of Building 2026 for the processing campaign.
Yeah. So the second question, that's 2026. If you use the facility for down blending and certification. Is that going to be? You mentioned about they're cleaning the hot cell, make room, maybe getting equipment ready, repair something. Do they need a major modification or just a minor to as long as the uranium-233 process going in, then keep evolving and then make some change, or fiscal 15 going to do a major modification of the facility in order for the project?
The activities being done, there's the HEPA filter change out right now, a modernization or upgrade of the ventilation system to upgrade the control panel because it's all outdated and needs to be upgraded. The fire protection control panel is another one. Clean out of the legacy materials out of the hot cells is being finished. There was some laboratory space in there where there was some residual waste in those that had been cleaned out. But the actual modifications required for the processing campaign are pretty minor in reality because they have to modify the doors on the back of the hot cells to allow the material to be moved in there.
So no major like shielding or layout, that kind of?
No, nothing like that.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. And that was the beauty of that facility, was already pretty well geared up to do this campaign.
Anybody else? Bill, thank you very much for a very enlightening presentation.
Okay.
We appreciate it. Moving on to committee reports. The Process Committee, Mr. Paulus.
Yes, we met Wednesday a week ago here. We approved a work plan for the year. We elected a chair and a vice chair, which is myself and Ms. Price. We discussed briefly the possibility of making changes to our annual retreat and some aspects of this meeting, and that will be put on hold till a further date in terms of what gets changed, because there's too many people working that. And we will not meet, part of our work plan is we will meet approximately now 4 times a year, so we don't meet again till I believe February of next year. March?
March. Thank you, Mr.
That's
Paulus.
all.
Environmental Management and Stewardship, Mr. Hatcher or Ms. Staley?
A couple of things went on at the meeting that are worth mentioning. One, we had a really great summary of the groundwater strategy program from a meeting that week by Dan Good. And a lot of discussion took place. I strongly recommend that everyone read the minutes of the meeting. They're really good minutes, and they contain details of the groundwater program should you be interested in learning more about it. Second thing we did was to elect officers, and Corky and I were re-elected co-chairs, and we are willing to serve another year. So that's the report. We're going to meet again next Wednesday here at 6 o'clock.
Thank you, Bob. Public outreach. Neither one of the Public Outreach Committee members are here right now, but I did get a good briefing on the public outreach from Ms. Lyons at our executive. At the last meeting, Ms. Lyons and Ms. Cook were the only ones that were there, and there was some talk about what to do with the Public Outreach Committee. There's potential that since it's not getting that much participation, we may roll that into a subcommittee or an ad hoc committee and put a lot of the work over to the executive committee. One of the things they did talk about was their work at the exhibit at the American Museum of Science and Energy. It was kind of on hold a little bit until the dust settled regarding the change of ownership or management of the museum. Ms. Lyons did suggest that we go ahead and complete our exhibit at the museum, get it up, get it running, get it working, and if the new management doesn't like it later on down the road, they can tell us to do what they wish with it. But if it's in place, I think it'll probably stay, and they've got some upgraded kiosks and some good information on it. Executive committee met last Wednesday also, and we went over a lot of stuff, and I do want to talk to you a little bit about the chairs meeting. One of the things that I was quite surprised, and I want to comment David Adler, who is our alternate designated federal officer, who does an outstanding job. You guys don't realize what a great job he does compared to what I've seen and what the other boards talk to me about out at Idaho National Laboratories. They were amazed that we were so up to speed on our budget. Some of them don't even get budget briefings. They aren't even told about it, and they were surprised that we do a recommendation every year, and that Dave is he is so attentive to our needs and stays on top of us, keeps us well informed. So on the way out, pat him on the back because he deserves it. There are a lot of good DDFOs and ADFOs in the system, but I have not seen or heard of anyone as good as David. Anyway, one of the things that we had talked about is we are looking perhaps doing some field trips out to various sites as the topics come up. A good example would have been Bill's presentation tonight. It would have been rather lengthy, but if we could have gone and looked at the pool, looked at the MRSE, looked at all those things, would have probably made it a lot better for some of you. But that's what we want to do. We want to get you more involved. Instead of looking at a slide and sitting here at the table listening to us talk, get out, ask questions, interact back and forth with the presenter. So that's some of the stuff that we're looking at. The Oak Ridge National Lab presentation is one of the first. We'll probably be making a tour out there in the very near future. The Tennessee Technology Park soils presentation will be coming up. That's something, going out and looking at it and seeing what it is, a picture doesn't do justice when you can look at the slab, the field, and then you see a stream right next to it. You don't see that all in the picture. Ms. Kanes talked about perhaps having an open house for the members to meet with the environmental management team. I think we're going to do something about that very shortly. We will keep you in the loop on that so you understand what they do, how they interact, and be able to talk, ask them questions that you might not want other people to hear. So field trips will probably include ETTP for Zone 1, Y12 Mercury cleanup strategy, so you can see where that really is. And one of the things that we also want to do is just kind of an open topic, facilitated, round-robin board meeting. Something where we all can participate, talk back and forth amongst each other. What do we like? What don't we like? Where should we go? How should we do it? Just to get a feeling for what we're like, what you're like, what direction that perhaps we should take. That'll be something coming up in the next year or two.
The research and national defense facilities of the Oak Ridge Reservation are vital parts of our nation's scientific community. To continue to meet these needs, parts of the reservation require cleanup from the impacts of years of energy research. The Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board is the voice of the community, providing input to the U.S. Department of Energy on its environmental cleanup of the reservation. To learn more about this important work, you're invited to attend meetings of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board.